Today's Sober Friends podcast is brought to you by Angie Mack. Angie Mack is our friend and a friend of the show. You can find her on Facebook. She supports us each and every week, and she bought us 10 coffees. She said, thanks for all you guys do. Love you guys. And I miss John. Yeah, who's that guy? If you want to be like Angie Mack and help support the show and support what we do and help us defray some of the costs so we can get the message that recovery is possible to the new guy and the new girl, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod. I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. We're here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends podcast. Yeah, we miss John too. I guess we'll address it. John hasn't really been here since the first of the year, and not really much of a conspiracy if you're looking for John. John is a pretty busy guy. He left retirement to go take another job. And he does Joe and Charlie's, and he does a lot in recovery. And he's got for somebody who I think he would say is probably towards the end of his career. I'd say he's at the end of his career because he already retired once. And retirement was a little too boring for him. And that's really when he was helping out on the podcast when he was retired. He went back to work, has a demanding job, and it's tough to carve out the time for him to be here. So John always has an empty mic waiting for him if he has the time to do it. And John knows that. And that's why you haven't heard John. So I appreciate a couple people have reached out, and I just have been hesitant to talk about it because I'd prefer him to be here. I like his message, but he can't. And we respect that. He's still doing a lot of great things in recovery. John's doing great. He's probably going to, I don't know. You tell me, how are his knees doing?
He's having he has a bad knee, gimpy knee. He's getting a knee replacement early November, so it's going to knock him off the hiking trail for a while, but hopefully it'll all go well for him, and he'll be back out there soon.
Yeah, he's active enough that he has a knee replacement. He probably by next summer will be in a better shape than he was this summer.
Yeah, now he should do well with it because he's active, he's working out. So hopefully, I mean, they're pretty routine. Nothing's 100%, but they're pretty routine nowadays. And hopefully, like I said, he'll be able to do that. And so we're supposed to go out Sunday. Sunday's supposed to be a beautiful day, so we're supposed to hit the woods come Sunday. So we'll see where we go.
I haven't talked to him in ages, and it's mostly because he lives in Granby, and that's too far away from me. You're not like, I don't see you every week at the meeting and you're not within 5 minutes of me. I'm not going to see you.
Yeah, that's a long way to go. South Windsor to Granby.
I don't know, 25 minutes. That's too far from me.
It is.
But you get wrapped up in your own stuff. So if you want to beg John to come back on, reach out to me. I'll give you his personal phone number and you can text him. So our topic tonight, Steve, is about trust. I have a friend, a very close friend, who is constantly telling me, I don't trust people, and I get burned every single time I trust. And this person got burned recently, real bad, to the point they were going to change their business direction. When I say business direction, not have a business anymore. And I think I was instrumental in saying, don't do that. Don't allow that to be what changes what you got into, that you have a purpose. Don't let them win. And it was that she told me this was that somebody violated my trust. They said something that was gaslighting. I considered them a good friend. And then they did something business-wise to violate my trust even further. This proves that everybody's going to burn you. Yeah. And I hate to say that I can identify with that because that's very cynical. I can identify with that immediate feeling.
Yeah.
I got burned a bunch of times.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have. If you go through life and you take any chances at all, right, that you're gonna get burned. People do it. You know, it's a topic that hits close to home. I mean, I had tons of trust issues, tons. And I've spoken about some of my issues here on this podcast, but early on. And a lot of that was, and you hear this too, and I'm not saying anything like this is what's happening with your friend, but for me personally, it was a reflection, right? I was looking at a characteristic that I wasn't trustworthy, so therefore I didn't trust people, right? So it was like I was looking at that character defects, and that's still today. The character defects of other people that bother me most are the character defects that I have, right? And
That's
I
the
look
way
at
it is
them.
with me.
So that was a problem and then I had lots of trust issues in relationships, tons and tons of trust issues in relationships. And again, that goes back to childhood and all that kind of growing up in an alcoholic family with an alcoholic mom. And it really messed with me for years, like well into my adulthood, like till I came back this last time and got sober and really did some deep work. And then I was able to finally sort of sort through it and come to peace with it. So it's a lot better now. And even today, like I don't trust to the fact that I don't think I'll get burned. Like I know I'll get burned, right? I know I'll get burned. But I also know today, like I'll only expose myself so much. You know?
I will tell you that if I was listening to a podcast and somebody was talking about me, even if you don't say my name and I heard maybe that person has issues because maybe they feel trust is an issue for them or however you're saying, I know I'm butchering it. Oh, that would fry me at first, especially if I was new in recovery. Yeah. And I don't think we're saying this person's not trustworthy. That's why they don't trust. But I think there's that internal feeling of, well, where did I break trust? Those are the issues that I have. Where did I not show up on time? So therefore I get pissed off when I'm not on time or when people are not on time for me.
Absolutely.
And that, I think there's a trigger there as well of when you get burned, that is a pressure point for you. There are some people, those are the things that are the biggest pressure points of when we've had trauma, that trauma comes up in other ways. And it could be, I've been burned, I've been hurt when I gave love. Mm-hmm. And I chose to button myself and protect myself, and I open up, and again, I get punched in the face.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I mean, if you're really going to go into a relationship, truly go into a relationship, you have to make yourself vulnerable. And if you make yourself vulnerable, you open yourself up to be hurt. No question about it. It's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. And you do have to trust people, and we're all human beings, right? And it's one thing that I've learned, like we're all human, we're all fallible, we're all not perfect, we're all, you know, we all have our struggles. And so nothing's guaranteed in life. Nothing is guaranteed in life. I've come to realize that. So I realize today that when I open myself up, then there's a chance I'll get burned. And I also look today, like I'm able to look at people today and give people a lot of empathy. Really, even people who are doing that kind of stuff, like, man, you know, what's up with that person? You know, like I really think, like, if somebody's going to steal something from me or something, like, I always think, like, God, I hope that person really needs it, right? And the truth is, even if they're a drug addict, I understand that, right? I remember my brother years ago, we were talking, like one of his guys, my brother always hung around. He was in recovery for a long time and hung around with guys who were in and out. And one day he was living with my dad in my dad's house. I think my dad had passed by this time. And one of the guys came over and stole his lawnmower and pawned it, right? And even when we both looked at like, yeah, that's what addicts do, right? Yep. Addicts are gonna do that kind of stuff, right? They're gonna burn you. And I think he went down to the pawn shop and got it back. But it's like that kind of shit happens in recovery. I was part of a group, right, where it turns out that the treasurer was stealing money for a long time. You know, we never, and I was new to the group, and I never picked up, but some of the old timers like, we should have more money, like something's going on here, right? We should have more money than we have. And finally, you know, what happened was, you know, they finally just decided, like, I guess it was supposed to be a 2-year term, and the next time we had a vote, like they just took it away. A couple of the old timers like, nope, we're done. So those things are going to happen. They're going to happen in recovery. They're going to happen in active addiction, and then if you mentioned that there was some business issue going. You throw business in there, it's a whole nother ballgame, right? It's a whole nother ballgame. It really is. It just adds a whole nother dynamic to it.
What the other person did was so small. Not small in terms of the effect, but there was some pettiness in terms of some things that if you're that desperate, do you have enough respect in your own abilities that you would take advantage of another person's business and try and go around them the way they did? I'm trying to be incredibly vague here, but knowing the whole story here, there were a couple things that the other person did that could harm my friend's business. But in the end, it probably would be a short-term thing. And it's more like if you really believe in your abilities, you doing that gives you a little bit of a leg up for a short period of time, but it's not going to make or break. So if you feel like you have to go to that level, it's something wrong about you. And helping other people and listening to them really gives me a kick. I enjoy doing that. It makes me feel better. You talked about empathy. I can do it where I'm not just giving the person advice until they ask, what do you think I should do? Should I close my business? My answer is no. Why? Why would you do that? And then I had a little funny there about, if you do that, then somebody else that we know will be the only one in your business. And that was enough. That was enough to kick her in the ass and say, yep, you're absolutely right. But I try to, it feels like you're having trouble trusting. Feels like this was trauma coming back up. Feels like they pushed your buttons. There's really a lot of that in just listening and trying to hold back and give my opinion when it's warranted. All right, let's bring this back to when we were drinking, when we were using. Where do you think our trust issues pop up in active addiction?
In active addiction for me, again, one of the problems, right, is like I was drinking. I wasn't totally open with my drinking. So first of all, I was living this lie, right? So I was living this lie. I lived with a person who did not know what was going on at all, right? And my last relapse, my wife did not know I was drinking until I admitted I was drinking, and that's when I went back to get some help. So that whole thing, I'm living a lie. So how do I trust anybody when my whole life is a lie? So that was the biggest problem for me, is that, and then again, I've talked about it, growing up in that alcoholic family for me, where I felt like I couldn't trust. I just became so self-sufficient at such an early age. I didn't feel like I needed anybody. So therefore I didn't need to trust anybody. So, and it just went on and on and on. And again, I had some bad relationships, that I felt like trust was broken in them. Right. And then what I did was I turned around and behaved that same way, so it was really tough. It was really tough. So, it's really hard in active addiction, right? You're living, for most of us, not everybody. If so many people do it right out in the open, we live somewhat of a lie. Typically we're not fessing up how much we're using, how much we're drinking, even if people know we are. And that's where it starts. I mean, I think once you're there, it's really, really difficult.
Absolutely. I was also lying to myself in active addiction. I wasn't being honest with how much I was drinking. In the end, I was drinking scotch. That's very easy to drink a little bit more than you should because there's not much room for error there. Boxed wine, I could just walk over conspicuously and top off the glass while you're looking at me. And you saw me only have one glass. And if you're being very obvious about your deception, people don't pick up on it, generally. So I had those things, and there was a lot I was doing to lie to myself. So, and a lot of it was covering up trauma. So there was I didn't want you to tell me I had a problem. That was too painful. So there was the deception around there. And also the idea of being vulnerable in any way, because I think vulnerability equals trust. If you're vulnerable with other people, you could get hurt. And there are aspects of that with me that are still very tough. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a lot of what it is with my friend is she says trust. I see it more as vulnerability. You're a little bit vulnerable with somebody and bam, you get hurt.
Yeah, it's tough. I always say I have a thick skin, and I think I do for the most part, except for probably, obviously people closest to me, my wife, maybe even my kids, they can push my buttons easier than other people probably could. But one of the things I was thinking about was that one of the things that I think has helped me with my trust issues is working with other alcoholics, right? Because one of the things I've learned and I had to learn is that, and not only working with them, like just watching new alcoholics come into the rooms and you talk to them. And this was just somebody who came in just 2 weeks ago at the Monday night meeting. Came in, brand new. I'm 2 weeks sober. I just got my third DUI. I got a 3-year-old at home. I'm really, really worried. Talked to this person after the meeting, got them a big book, which they didn't have, all that kind of stuff go on. And then I said to them, I hope you come back because I'd really like you. I would really like to be part of your recovery. Like, that's all. Like, hope you come back. And then this week shows up, right? This person who was so worried, all that, nowhere to be found, And I realized today, that's what happens in recovery. Like that, anytime you've worked with people, like I've worked with a lot of guys, and most of them, the vast majority of guys who I ever tried to help are not sober. They are not sober. And I come to realize it doesn't mean that they're being dishonest to me. It's just part of the disease, right? I mean, I've sat with people for over a year. It's literally going through it on and off through COVID. I had 2 sponsees coming into my house. We never stopped meeting. We never stopped meeting. One of them, I have no idea where he is. And the other one, been around. I've talked to him once in a while. I don't think he's all that great shape, but who knows? I don't know exactly what's going on. And that's the other, place I realized, like, I put myself out there. I just, these guys are going to come, they're going to go. I don't have to worry about trusting them. I am careful with what I tell new people, right? I'm not going to tell new people all of my dark secrets. I certainly don't want to tell anything that isn't sort of already publicly known, right? So I got to be careful with that kind of stuff. But my program, my recovery has really helped me work on that and actually make some distinction as to where I should put some trust and maybe where I shouldn't.
You think the traditions come into play here? Because I think the anonymity with the traditions fit into this somewhat of it's okay to trust, but there's also that line of what do you share and when do you share it for your own help, for your own well-being and those of the others around you. Because I was really, when you were saying that, I was thinking traditions.
Yeah, traditions help us in a lot of those ways, right? They give us those guardrails. That's what they do, right? Those traditions give us those guardrails as to, where to sort of keep it. A lot of leeway in there. You can move all around, but some guardrails to keep you from going off the edge. Yeah, I mean, it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing. I feel like today that it's not that big of an issue, but some of that comes with life experience too, right? I'm an old guy, I know the person you're talking about too, and they're not an old person like me.
Nope.
They still got a lot to go.
They're an old soul, but they're not an old person.
No, definitely. So
I think this is really about there, and I think when you find recovery, there does have to be some trust in yourself that you can handle the trust violation. That's a lot of words there. There is something to be said with you have to learn to be vulnerable and risk being hurt, because if you don't, you could miss out on something. You could miss out on a wonderful relationship with somebody else in recovery. You could miss making a new friend. You could get burned, or you could develop a friendship, relationship in some way, connection to another person in recovery or not, that is going to make life a lot better. And if you shut yourself off, you're never going to be disappointed. You're going to be lonely. You might be miserable, but you'll never be disappointed. And I think a lot of times people aren't going to do that. It's also very easy to find ways that you're going to get violated. If you're always looking to get your trust violated, you'll never be disappointed either.
No.
You have to be careful that way.
Yep. Yeah, our buddy Mike has talked about that. My buddy Mike's been in the program for a long time, been sober for a long time, and just in the last 4 years, got a sponsor and started working through the steps. And one of the things he always said that he was afraid. He didn't trust people to tell his stuff to, right? And one of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking is like, where does trust come into our program? Well, trust comes into finding that person, and certainly in our program of AA, finding that person to be your sponsor, and then, sharing with that person in a fifth step, all of that stuff about you that are the reasons that you drank, whatever they might be. And we hear it all the time, right? Like people said, I was never going to tell anybody about this, but when it came down to it, I knew I had to bare my soul in order for me to stay sober. By the time I got here, I was so beat up emotionally. When I got here the second time, my drinking was bad. It was, I was alcoholic. I was drinking alone in the basement. But I just wasn't drinking the volume that I had been when I came in the first time. But I was emotionally and spiritually just beat down completely. And for me to trust, and I knew the person because he had been my sponsor the first time. For me, it wasn't a problem, and I didn't hold back anything when I finally did all this work. So it's a big thing, right? So I think if for us in our program, in order to get sober, you need to find trust. At least in one person, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Our buddy Timmy talks about that. He goes, there's one person and he says that, only one person. He says, everybody doesn't have to know my story, but one person needs to know it. And he talks about how there was one person who knew everything about him. And I know for me that was important. Now, if you're out there using a different type of program, if you got a different community, that may play a little bit differently. But I still believe that even in those situations, you need to have somebody that is totally trustworthy in your life, so that you could share stuff. You got to be able to share. Like, I feel like shit today, man.
Yes.
I feel like shit. I feel like everybody's beating on me. I feel like whatever it might be, so that you could have those conversations and maybe get some help with them, and not advice, but just get some help or something like that happened to me, or here's what I did, or something like that. So for me, trust is really, really important. Today it's easier for me. Like, I go to a men's meeting, and pretty much at that meeting, I will almost share anything. It's not a huge meeting, but I will pretty much put anything out there. There's a few things I won't, but even then, those things are like, if I come in with something that I'm not going to put out the whole meeting, I'm putting it out to somebody when I walk in the door. It's like,
right.
I'll be talking to somebody, just to get it off my chest. So really, really important.
I think that also talks to the quality of meetings.
Yeah.
And this is, if you don't know what a home group is that one meeting, come hell or high water, you go to it all the time, regularly. You generally take service opportunities with that group. Like that's the default group. If you had no other groups to go to in a whole week, you're going to go to that meeting. And whatever that looks like for you, if you're not in a 12-step group, of having that tribe of I need to be around those people. And if you can find that group of people, then it's very easy to share anything in that group. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, if you're willing to share with somebody and extend trust, more often than not, it will be extended back to you. That you might inspire somebody else to be more open. That's the other issue. The big book does not say anything about a sponsor. So sponsorship is something that was a term that was created post big book. I think whatever you're in, there's an opportunity to sponsor somebody, in quotation marks, sponsor, that you could just be one of the leaders in whatever group it is where you're taking on a responsibility for somebody who is newer and greener in recovery and just taking them under their wing, of being a mentor. Really, a sponsor in many ways is just a mentor who knows a little bit more and is willing to take on somebody newer.
Yeah, and have some experience, right? And that's the whole thing. And it doesn't have to be an AA program, right? No. But if you have a community out there, wherever you find it, right? Even if you go into some of these paid setups and all, but you're going to find people who have some experience. And again, like, so when you walk in, listen, one of the problems we all face as alcoholics and addicts is that we all feel like we're somewhat unique. We're different. You know, and it's nice. It was nice for me. It was important for me when I got into recovery to know, oh, wait a minute, I'm not unique. Like, these problems are not, because if I was, then it would be like, how can anybody help me? Nobody's ever had these problems before. But today I understand, like, these people have had these same problems. So the nice thing about that is you go in there and this person can help you because they've been through some of those same things. And again, like I said, if you find that tribe, and if you have enough of these people in your lives, then you find people who can help you with specific situations too. And I just know that, listen, I've gotten help from weird places. Oh, yeah. Weird places that, like, I would have never, ever, ever thought. Some of the lessons I remember in my head are really just strange situations where somebody said something to me and I've just never forgotten it. And if you told me that person was going to say something important to me, I would have said, no way, not possible. Not possible that person could give me any worthwhile advice. And luckily I don't feel that way because lots of people have helped keep me sober.
This is the beauty of being in a 12-step group. I talked about this. I had a recent interview. By the time this runs, it'll probably have been a few weeks ago. But I talked to our friend Madeline, who was on our show. In our time, it was last night. In your time listening to it, it probably was a few weeks ago. So I'm talking to Madeline, and one of the things that we were talking about is it doesn't matter who you are. So Madeline hosts the Happiest Sober podcast. If you take a look at Madeline's photo, Madeline looks great. I feel like I look doughy. I'm quite a bit older than her. We could sit there for an hour and lose track of the time just chatting because we had recovery in common. She's got a different path to sobriety than I do. It doesn't matter. It just picks up like that because we're both sober people. Being young, living in Toronto, me living in Connecticut, it didn't matter. We had sobriety in common. We had a drinking problem, and there was enough there that you can have a long conversation with somebody and make a meaningful connection with somebody no matter what. And I think that's the thing that if you have a 12-step meeting or groups that you go to, you could have that person that you look at and say, they're very different in life than me. Maybe they're super, super old, or there's some kid, 20 years old, who's coming into recovery who's got 6 months. The kid who is 20 years old and has 6 months of recovery has plenty to teach me.
Absolutely.
And I may look and say, hey, that 20-year-old has 2 sponsees already and I don't have any. What can I learn from that kid? I'm saying a 20-year-old is a kid. Boy, I feel like an old codger now. But somebody like that can teach me something because to us, we're the same. Or somebody who's a different color or persuasion than me. It doesn't matter. And I can have that. And you learn empathy. You learn somebody else's steps are not, just because they've walked a different way of life, it opens you up to other people's way of living because you have that one thing to connect to.
Right. And again, and when you have that community, you're able to find those people that you can count on, right? You can trust. You know, that's the beautiful thing about what's happened to me since I've gotten sober, is that I developed this community of people who I can trust no matter what. Like, I can count on. Like, these people will I realize, like, these people, if I'm in need, will be there for me. Not with just talk, with absolutely showing up. you know. And, you know, my buddy Tim and I went up and helped Lori yesterday move some washers and dryer stuff. And it's that kind of stuff, right? To get together, you know, we reached out, hey, Timmy, can you do this? Yep. So we all got together yesterday and spent about 3 hours muscling some washer and dryers around. And it's a beautiful thing to have those relationships, right? And to know that when we set up this meeting and we say, hey, Tim, can you help out? Yeah, that Tim's going to be there, right? That I'm going to be there, that other people are going to show up and not go, oh, no, you know, I forgot about it, or something else came up, or all that bullshit excuses that we used to have when, you know, when I wouldn't, like you said, that I wouldn't show up or I would be late for something, you know. Nowadays, I don't need to do that, and the people I hang around with, for the most part, aren't doing that either.
I hope you've learned something about trust. I'd love to hear your side of, is this something that's a button for you that when pushed, it causes a reflex in some way? Do you still struggle with trust? How long in your career did it take for you to gain trust? If you want to hit us up, Instagram at SoberFriendsPod. The website is SoberFriendsPod.com. Hey, I got another thing I want you to do. Can you go to Apple and fill out a review and tell people how awesome this show is and give us 5 stars? If you want to stay connected to the show, you go to SoberFriendsPod.com and put yourself on the mailing list. They send out a little email once a week, just what's on the show, a little sober news, maybe stuff that's going on with the program. It'll be quick. I'm not going to sell your information. Just want to stay connected. Steve, I trust you had a good show today.
Hey, Matt, it was great. I always love being here. I always love doing this.
And we'll see everybody next week. Bye, everybody. You made it this far into the podcast. That tells me you're a pretty big fan. If you like what we do and you find value in the podcast, consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/SoberFriendsPod. Your donation keeps us on the air to help out the new guy and helps us defray some of our costs. If you find value in our podcast, please consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/SoberFriendsPod.